Welcome, everyone, to the Writer's Block podcast. My name is Cara Ray, and I just have to apologize as we start off our talk today. I am recovering from laryngitis. Um, yeah, it's kind of like Phoebe and Friends who had the sexy phlegm. I don't know if this is that sexy phlegm voice, but I'm going to do my best. And anyway, thank you for being here and just so excited to meet Grant Herbel. He is joining us today. So welcome, Grant.
Thank you. A pleasure to be here.
Yeah, well, um, we found you. I found you through some of my writing friends that are here on this call, told me about the work that you're doing on Substack. You have a Substack called The Writer's Calling. And I've just been diving into all of the wonderful information and encouragement and instruction you provide there on your Substack. But before we get too deep into all of that, would you please just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you live, family, what you enjoy doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hello everyone. I am living in southern Missouri right now. I kind of grew up in the Midwest area. Northern Missouri is where I actually grew up, and then we lived in Lincoln, Nebraska for a while. Really enjoyed that, but a lot of our family lives around here, so this is where we've kind of come back and established ourselves. But yeah, living here, one of the best things about southern Missouri is if anybody's ever experienced, we have a lot of caves and rivers, and I've always been just a little outdoorsy. I would consider myself, and so the rivers here are spring fed, they're crystal clear, they flow quickly, and in the summertime it gets to be, 105, 110 sometimes, and if you go on a float trip on those, you can just jump in and stay cool, and it's just a really nice experience. So also the winters are a little milder than they were in Nebraska for us, so I'll always take that. But yeah, it's a good spot. We live just a little bit out in the country, not too far, and just really get to experience nature. My wife and I, we have a three-year-old boy, and so yeah, that's about it, I think.
Ah, that's great. So it sounds like you do some adventuring when you're not writing. Is writing your full-time job? Is this a hobby for you?
It's an interesting question. It's not my full-time job in terms of income for sure. I have spent a lot of time writing in my life, but yeah, it's usually more of a side hustle, if you will, in terms of money, just because um, I've always, yeah, I guess it's more of a hobby at this point to answer the question.
Yeah.
I do have a full-time job, but I work remotely. It's in IT, strangely enough, so kind of the other side of the spectrum. But writing or the humanities just in general has always been the passion of mine, I would say. So yeah, just do it in my spare time, pretty much.
Yeah. Well, and by hobby, I think it's more ministry, really. It sounds like, based on what I've read of yours online, and I appreciate that perspective of it as well because, um, yeah, you are clearly interested in honing the craft and ministering to others, and so I think that's great. So tell us a little bit about your writing journey, especially if this is not something that you're afforded to do full time, but in your spare time. Like where did this all start? And tell us a little bit about your Substack as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure we can all identify with just this kind of itch to write that I developed when I was really young. My mother had me do like creative writing exercises and stuff, just little stories, and I always just enjoyed putting words together. I was a big reader as a kid, um, and yeah, there was always something that was appealing to me about it. And so, but I didn't really have like an avenue where I consistently did that or anything like that. So it was a journal or something. Um, And I will say that when it comes to my writing journey, if you will, a lot of it is tied pretty heavily to my journey with God as well. So it was in college that I took a literature class or two that it really that's where like kind of came together for me, where I really kind of fell in love with it. And obviously did a lot of writing for those classes and just really enjoyed it. And so I would dabble in writing a book in some genre that I was interested in, and I would get a couple chapters in and never come back to it. And then later in life, uh, as an actual like side hustle, I started doing some ghostwriting for people. I started doing some limited copywriting, and even I was writing YouTube scripts for people and just different things, like just getting in there. And I enjoyed that. It kind of made it feel like more of a job, but it was enjoyable to do that. And in the midst of that, as I was kind of having a little more output, I guess, in terms of writing and really enjoying it, I thought, I should probably start a Christian blog because whatever that means, because I grew up as a Christian and I felt that that was just the thing you needed to do was you got to spread the word of the gospel or whatever avenue it takes. And so I dabbled in that too, started a blog, started another one. My domain would run out. I'd start another one. I just never really committed to it all the way. I didn't have that almost like writing energy for it for some reason. I just never really took off. And so during that time, uh, or a little bit towards the beginning of 2020, I had an experience where the way I'd been living my life and different things, I was really not experiencing the Christian life that I would expect, I guess you could say. And God was really leading me to a group of people who studied with me and really presented the gospel in a way that I hadn't considered before. And then through prayer and direct relationship with God, I had a real re I received the gospel, I should say, in a way that I hadn't before. And so that was a game changer for me in terms of my relationship with God. And after that, I didn't really write for a while, a few years at all. And no real reason. It was kind of on the back burner for me. And so then last year, I found out about Substack and I decided maybe this would be, and we might talk about this a little bit more, but there was a coalescing of things that kind of led me to think maybe this is something I could write about. And Substack was a platform that I found out about, and it seemed like a low barrier of entry. I didn't have to do all the WordPress stuff like I'd done in the past, and just get in there and start sharing things and see what happens. And so that is, I think that's my journey. That's my story with writing. Uh, Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so relatable because it sounds like there were a lot of false starts and stops. And do you think in that, and you mentioned a coalescing of kind of events in your life and kind of a renewal of your convictions, your Christian convictions. Do you think that prior to this current iteration of your writing that you're currently working on, where you didn't quite feel the direction, do you think that was due in part to what were those all kind of like trial and error type beginnings when you were doing it on WordPress? I guess what I'm trying to figure out was like, was all of that necessary in your mind to get to where you are today? And I think the Christian formation aspect of it is so important too. So I'm just kind of wondering, as you look back, how do you kind of make sense of the steps that brought you to where you are today?
Yeah, that's a good question. I do think they were a necessary part of the journey to, if I look back and see where I was today, because I can see clearly, especially towards the last few years leading up to my more of, I don't know what to call it, not a conversion per se, but just something a deeper experience of the gospel. And the things that led up to that. I can see God leading in that. And I did learn a lot about things like how to format an article, just like the nuts and bolts of it, how to I didn't really get into this so much, but I learned things that I never ended up using, like running ads and just different marketing things that I ended up using for the people that I ghost wrote for. And so that was really good. In other words, it all accumulated knowledge in my head, which is a good thing. But when it comes to the actual content that I was writing, it wasn't coming from a place of direct experience, I wouldn't say. The blog that I remember the best was one that was like looking at different forms of media, like shows on Netflix or movies or music or whatever, and kind of noticing the bad things about it and pointing it out. So like, here's why you shouldn't watch this, or here's why you shouldn't listen to this. This has some negative influences or something like that. At least that was the idea. I think I wrote one or two posts on that one, but because I never really had that direct connection with God, I don't feel like where I recognized essentially how deep his love is for me, that I was just kind of manufacturing something that sounded Christian or that seemed like it would align with Christian values. So I don't know that that writing itself was terribly valuable looking back, because it didn't come from a real place, I should say. So, but I do think it had a lot of value for forming me on the journey. And looking back, I can see all of this stuff that I think when I finally came to the Substack, it allowed me to get past some of the things that we feel at first, like the fear of just starting something and just putting something out there, because I'd done that several times already. And so I think that helped me actually move forward with where I felt God was kind of calling me there. So I think it was beneficial for that too. But yeah, I think that about covers it.
Yeah. I mean, I just had a similar experience where I had blog spots and, early iterations of things. And I just didn't quite know what I wanted to write about back
Mm,
then. And so I think sometimes it's just time and maturity and
yeah.
time with the Lord that makes the difference in our sanctification, God preparing us for something new. So I was curious about that. Your tagline on your podcast is "Journey from the shallows into the depths of knowing God." Love that. It sounds like that kind of encapsulates part of your journey too. So, tell us a little more about what that means to you and like what you're trying to convey to your readers.
Yeah. Yeah, the key word there in that little tagline is journey for sure. We kind of already talked about this, but just a matter of um, kind of yeah, like a reflection of my own journey in a way. Because I think prior to fully receiving the gospel, I definitely lived in what I would consider the shallows of relationship. And because I can look back and see how God was leading, I can see a clear journey up to that point and even past, whether it's through people in my life or events that occurred or just even just like putting stuff out there, writing stuff like that. And God was always leading me toward himself through that. And so for that reason, I'm pretty passionate about it relates to writing actually, because it's the art of storytelling in a way, because it may not be literally telling stories, but it can be. But structuring your writing in a way that it follows a kind of journey pattern, or any content really, where the reader is taken on a journey as well. And so maybe you begin a piece of content with in one place, and then you end on a different, and you bring the reader to a better place than when they started. So for me, that's kind of the storytelling arc in just about any or the journey format in any content really. And so it might mean that something you're writing allows people to see God more clearly, or the depths of, just how much he loves you. But it could be, I write about this a little bit, is that it doesn't have to be a specifically or overtly Christian topic, but just something where you are really taking the reader along, I think is an effective way to engage with people. And so it definitely comes from personal experience because I felt like I said, I lived in the shallows and my relationship has just grown deeper and deeper since that time. And so that's kind of I feel like my desire and passion is to show that to people or take people along that journey as well as a fellow traveler.
Well, I think you do that well in your writing. I think too, there's like this definite um, feeling of like a misunderstanding of some truth that you're kind of guiding people through, whether it's like the misperceptions that we sometimes carry about building platform as Christians, or the desire to be read. Is that selfish? Is this about boasting in my own
Hmm.
um, success or what have you? Like, so I feel like you kind of understand um, those like where you are before and where you want to lead your reader to that after place, which I think is so great. And I just learned a lot just poking around on your Substack today because I feel like that is a message a lot of writers need to hear. I know all the women on this call today. This has been a conversation we've had many times, but do you feel like was that a struggle for you in your desire to write? Did you feel that kind of internal battle of like, is this selfish? Is this about me? Is this about the Lord? How did you kind of come to peace, come to terms with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I Part of those early starts that I had with attempting to write something that was Christian, I put it in quotes because I just thought that's what you had to do. But part of that was I felt like there was this urge that I felt like I needed to do something for God. And so this was my avenue to do that. It really had nothing to do with something I felt that God was calling me to do at the time. It was more like my own thought process led me to this, and I thought, well, I should just do this. But because of that, that's where, for me personally, that's where a lot of that did come in, is I would feel like, well, I'm still learning this stuff back then. I'll post to WordPress and we'll just see what happens. I didn't know anything about, I started to learn it, but search engine optimization and stuff, just trying to get it out there. But then I was thinking, if it comes to promoting myself or cross promoting on these different ways, I don't know what it would be, like Reddit or Facebook or something, is that, you know, am I just trying to build myself up by doing this, by trying to get eyes on me? That's what it felt like. And so, yeah, I ran into that a lot. And what that led to for me was just fizzling out because had this kind of battle in my mind. And it wasn't like I was agonizing over it necessarily, but it was in the back of my mind where I'm just thinking, maybe this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. And rather than go back and forth all the time, I just stopped doing it. And so, yeah, it's hard to say if something might have come of those things, but they ended up fizzling out. And again, in retrospect, that's fine. But I think it all comes down to, for me, what kind of changed. Well, I read a book called The Storied Life by Jared Wilson, and I don't know if you
Great
guys
book.
have.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a
I'm
great book.
familiar. It's a great book. Yeah.
It was crazy. I just saw it on a whim on a Kindle recommendation, and I read the first chapter. I was like, I'm in. I got to read this whole thing. I devoured that book because it really speaks to a lot of the things that I didn't realize. It was very validating, but also you see kind of the joy of creating something. when you're doing it as worship, which is kind of what he talks about. So there was that. And at the time, it was perfect timing because I had been reading a lot of how to succeed online as a writer. And in the modern era, it seemed to be a lot of short form content. So Twitter and LinkedIn and different things like that, just trying to get eyes on your stuff. And so it would be things like how to create the perfect headline. You know, you got to name your audience, you got to do this, 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 and then you have a template, plug in your a headline analyzer, get a hook, all this stuff, which is good advice for, getting out there. But for some reason, it always felt a little hollow to me because, again, I'm thinking, do I really need to go this hard on promoting? It felt disingenuous, I guess, because it felt like the words themselves were the star of the show, where really I'm trying to present something that's a little deeper, or even myself being the star of the show if I felt like I was worth promoting. So when this book came along, The Storied Life, it kind of reframed how I think about writing in general. And at this point, I wasn't really writing at all. This is a couple years ago. And so it was at that point where I kind of realized you can do both in a way. If you start from a place of secure identity, anything you're doing out of that can be an act of relationship, especially with not only with God, but with your readers. And so, in that way, optimizing your content or promoting or whatever is a way to facilitate that rather than to pridefully say, look at me and how great I am. So, I might have lost track of your question, but
No,
that's kind of where I feel.
I appreciate where your thought process on that. I was reading some of your posts today, and you had talked about, I don't see churches struggling with like providing a good microphone for their pastor to be heard and having good equipment and, standing up so that people can see him. And so I thought that was such a refreshing perspective because we would never look at that as like, oh, that's self-aggrandizing. No, he's serving his audience by making him easier to find, easier to hear, easier to listen to. So I think that's such a needed perspective. And I think too, like there is such a struggle of, and you've written about this as well, of just kind of measuring yourself. You mentioned earlier your identity. Um, I think sometimes it's so easy for us to just kind of go and check our numbers, see how many comments, reposts, shares, whatever it is, and kind of measure our success on those things. But when it's an act of worship, when it's like, I'm doing this unto the Lord,
Mm.
it kind of removes self from the equation, don't you think?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the key. Um, because I was gaining a lot of identity by what I could provide. To me, writing was an avenue to obtain something. It was money, both my side hustles, or validation on my ideas, or something like that. And so part of the receiving the gospel later in life was a shift in my identity for sure. And so it kind of reframes things. It's kind of the difference between identity, the core who you are, which as a Christian is unwavering. I was just reading through Ephesians 1. There's a lot of things that it says about who we are, who God is, and what He's done for us. And that puts you in a secure place so that then you have something like writing, which is more of a vocation. And you are a writer, but to me, it's something that I do that stems from the core identity. And so, yeah, that was a crucial moment. And like you said, when you are dedicating this to God, working with Him to share the gospel, or even just serve readers in a certain way that may not be overtly Christian, because I think you can write about, any topic, photography or whatever it might be. That's just always my first example. With it being something that's spirit led. I don't think that's a uncommon thing. So yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, I think that's great. Well, I hope we've laid that foundation for this conversation before I ask you this next question, because I think you said you just started this Substack. Was it 2024? Is that
Mhm.
correct? So you've amassed quite a following. I mean, I think that's really encouraging. Can you like what do you attribute that to? I feel like is that just because you've kind of had this aware self-awareness, this discovery of kind of your lane where God wants you, the identity things that we talked about where you're working out of, not for this identity in Christ. I would just like to hear your thoughts about the growth you've experienced.
Yeah, I do think that God has blessed, absolutely. Um, Overall, I think that it came because of that confluence of things that I mentioned, having the passion for writing and the desire to do it well, and then also the context of writing as a Christian kind of came together for me. And I know there's some people that talk about this, but on Substack, I wasn't really seeing it myself. I hadn't really met those people, and so identified what I thought was a gap in information of bringing those two worlds together in a kind of a holistic way. And to just say to people, if you're kind of on the fence about this, just do it, unless God is clearly saying don't do it, then
Yeah.
um, so that
Okay
was
to do it scared, right?
yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of that. One of my first posts was about imposter syndrome, which is a real thing, especially if you start sharing publicly. But anyway, so I identified what I thought was a gap in information out there, and so I thought this could be a good way to share what I'm learning on this new platform, new to me. And I'm newer overall, which I think is beneficial too, because a year ago even there were fewer people on the platform, and I think they had just launched the notes feature, or really close to then, and so people were kind of using that, and so I think it was just everything kind of came together at the timing of it. And my first few posts, I mean, I didn't actually start with the writer's calling. When I found Substack, I started writing just almost like a journal type thing. Can't remember what I named that publication, but it was about surrender and like things that I would consider good topics, but I wasn't really following publish weekly and do this, do that. I was just kind of seeing what happened. So I had some familiarity with the platform from that, but that didn't go anywhere, which is fine. But anyway, so once I kind of saw this come together for the writer's calling, I think it was timing and then having an idea of how to present that already and just hitting the ground running with that. And then we'll probably talk about this, but in terms of engagement, the Substack Notes feature was the big one that really drove a lot of that visibility. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
well, can you tell us a little bit more about that for those who might not be on Substack or understand exactly what what's the difference between notes and posting articles, for example?
Mhm. Yeah, I still am trying to boil down my description of what Substack is for somebody who's not familiar because I tell people you got to get on Substack and, start sharing this. And they're like, what's Substack? And I say, okay, how do I explain this? So if you're entirely unfamiliar with Substack, it's basically like having a blog, but every time you post your blog post, it goes out as a newsletter, or it can by default. And so it's a hybrid almost. You have an archive of content, but you also have a newsletter platform that's getting sent out to people whenever you post. And so it was just that for a long time. But then, yeah, I think it was about a year ago or a little more, they introduced the notes feature with a capital N, which is a feed, just like Twitter or Facebook or something, where you scroll down, you see people's status updates essentially. But it's not limited by characters, or if it is, I haven't found the limit. But it's not necessarily super short, but people share pictures. They might share a thought, but intention than a long form article would have. And it's really Substack's way to compete with those other sites and have something that has an infinite scroll that you keep going through. And if you are scrolling through that feed, you'll also see posts from people of long form articles. You can follow people. So I think the closest comparison is Twitter. It's just not that short. And it's a good way because when you do post a note, it shows your name, obviously, that you posted it, and you can just click follow or subscribe. And it's a good way for that reason to get eyes on your long form publication. And Substack also has a really good, or it seems to be to me, algorithm for connecting people. And so it's a good way to get discovered, I found through that.
So do you use the notes feature? I mean, it sounds like a social media feed. It sounds like the way we would post an article to Instagram or Facebook. So do you do you have any like tips or what like strategies has worked well? Like do you feel like every post requires one or two notes to be to kind of just keep things in front of people that may have not be subscribed or have forgotten to come and read your book, your post to go back and read it. Is that kind of how you use it or think about it?
Yeah, I kind of think about it on two levels. So the first one is looking at it exclusively from I'm posting short form content that's independent of long form content. So I might post a thought that I had or something like that that I haven't written an article about. And on one hand, that's kind of nice because if people resonate with that, you might write more about it later. But in that way, they're kind of independent thoughts or statements, whatever it is. And then the other side of it is, like you said, write an article, and then I will go through and just kind of get little snippets that I think could work, and I'll rework them a little bit into a standalone thought. And because what I started out doing was kind of posting little excerpts from my articles, which without context may not be as immediately gripping for people.
Right.
So kind of reworked that a little bit. And I do have what I've noticed with Substack Notes is that there is kind of a an art to it because again, it has to be, in my opinion, self-contained, so that people get a whole thought when they look at it. And I've kind of moved away from sharing like something, I don't know what it would be, but just like thinking of it as a status update and more like a little nugget of some kind of truth that you address directly to a group of people. And in my case, it would be Christian writers. And or it could be something that's just for Christians in general. I do relatively often I'll post something about, identity, who you are in Christ, stuff like that is another big facet of it. And those may not have a related article at all, but when you're addressing somebody specifically, it tends to do pretty well. And there are a ton of uh, guides out there from people saying, here's how you utilize notes to get to 10,000 subscribers in 3 months or whatever it is, and just like growth hacking methods of using notes. And I was never really interested in that per se, but little points of contact with people between your longer articles is kind of the way I look at them. And yeah, I think that
Yeah.
covers it.
Do you think that you said that you kind of attribute your growth to that? Do you think that that has been a big factor?
Yeah, I have to look at the metrics, but it's over 90%, I think, of subscribers
Interesting.
have come from notes because that's where the visibility comes in, I think. I could post 3 or 4 articles and people just might not see them because they're not promoted in the same way. But when subscribers come in through notes, then they're going to see those posts. Or if they follow me, which is where it's a little less of a commitment to follow somebody. You're not subscribed, you're not getting their emails to your inbox, but you see their posts on your Substack app. They'll see anything that I post in that case on the app. And so, yeah, it's been like top of the funnel people interacting and then they transfer over usually a lot of times to the longer form articles, but If it weren't for that, I just don't think it's built into the system so much to have that discoverability on the long form content.
Well, I love that. I think that's a really great way to expand your reach and get more people in the funnel, so to speak, even if it's just listening and learning from your bite-sized nuggets of wisdom and truth. So that's really great. Are you anywhere else online? Are you just on Substack?
I am just on Substack. Yeah.
Wow, you're like a purist.
I am right now. Yeah.
That's
I may
great.
branch out, but it's been enough for now. Trying to wrap my mind around how it all works and all that. So, but it's been
Mm,
good. That part of the reason notes are so great is the community aspect too, because and that's one of the things that I've reasons I've stuck with Substack so much because on the long form articles you'll get comments which are amazing. But because the notes have a wider net that you're casting, you get people commenting all kinds of different things, and you really start to connect with people again and again, and you really build community there. So it's been really good, and I haven't seen the need to move on or expand just yet. So yeah.
yeah, so could you tell us a little bit about that idea of building community on Substack? What does that mean to you? Does that mean, do these people know each other, or is it just that you feel like you're getting to know your readers based on their feedback and comments, etc.?
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, I mean, you'll see different people show up again and again just because you're in the same kind of space and the algorithm puts you together. And so you can really start to encourage each other one on one or just, great work on this and there's a chat feature so you can have your subscribers chat with you and share what they're working on and encourage each other in that way. So literal community in terms of communication. But yeah, especially because I I think a lot of community builds more deeply from vulnerability. And I don't have any problem, sharing what struggles or anything like that, or what God's done for me in this way with anybody. And I think that has connected me with people as well who recognize something in that they might be going through or they've experienced. And so right off the bat, you skip all the small talk or whatever. And if you're commenting with somebody or you are having a direct message, you always have just this instant connection. And so you can move from that. So Substack has facilitated all of that. So I've been very happy with the community aspect.
Yeah, I have a little FOMO about that because I was telling Grant before we hit record just that um, I'm not on Substack and I've kind of dabbled in it, but have kind of decided to stick with just working on my own website. But I think that's such a great feature. Like I really wish that was more available everywhere because I think especially as for writers that is so encouraging to get just those little feedbacks, comments. People are reading, people are enjoying, people are thinking deeply about something like that. I mean, that just feels so good as for a writer. It kind of helps spur you on to keep going. So I love that
Mhm.
Substack offers that. I think that's great. Um, Amy asked in the chat, in what ways do you use the chat feature distinctly from the notes feature? And maybe tell us
Good.
what is the chat feature?
Yeah, so everybody that has a publication, it's called. So as one person, I can have multiple publications and they can be different topics. So I might have one on uh, writing as a Christian. I might have one on photography, again, my go-to example. Whatever it is, they're still linked to you, and each publication has its own, or you can turn it on. It's not by default enabled, but you can turn on the chat. And with that, anybody that's subscribed to you can enter this certain section of your publication and literally just chat with whoever's in there. The moderation tools of the chat are a little bit lacking, in my opinion. So I've struggled a little bit with dealing with spam people coming
Mm.
in just for promotion, not sharing anything but just their article day after day, and kind of spamming the chat a little bit. So what you can do with the chat is you can have it available to everybody, or you can have it available to only your paid subscribers, which is how Substack monetizes as a platform. They take a little percentage, and you can charge people monthly or yearly to have access to. You can designate certain posts as paid only, or have a break in the middle of your article that says, if you want to proceed, you got to pay me.
Show me the
So you
money.
exactly, you can do a paywall. And you can do the same thing with your chat. You can say, I'm only chatting with people who are paid subscribers. So I've what I really liked when the writer's calling was just a little bit smaller. I had it available to everybody, and I wasn't seeing spam. And what I would do is I would post there twice a week, and I would say on the Tuesday or something, I'd say, "Hello, everybody. How was your weekend?" And then what are you struggling with right now or what has gone well for you? And then we would just talk, and it's a lot more casual there. You can reply to somebody directly and everybody sees it, or you can just answer the main question. And so it's unlike a note, it's not like you're going to a status update and you're leaving a comment that people can like and all this stuff. It's more intimate than
Hmm.
that, the chat is, and a little more, people feel like it's more casual. But you can also limit replies on your posts to only paid subscribers, so that it's a little bit flexible. And then later in the week, on Thursday or Friday, I would say share something you're working on, and maybe like some feedback and or some helpful critique, something to kind of build each other up as writers specifically. And so that was always really nice. And so at some point a couple months ago, because I was getting so much just posts and from people spamming it, and then anybody that's in the chat will get those notifications, and then they tend to just leave because it's annoying them. Try to find the balance. I turned it on only for paid subscribers, and I try to post and let anyone answer. It's kind of confusing. I'm still trying to work it out. So if you go there now, it probably looks a little empty in there, but hopefully we'll get that going again in a way that works for everybody. But it's just a more intimate, more one-on-one style way to interact.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that really is the community aspect of it, kind of in the same way like the old school message boards and Reddit threads and things like that, where you're actually engaging in conversation. And I mean, that is building community for sure.
Hmm.
Um, so I also wanted to just ask you about the how you're doing with the paid membership option within Substack. Do you have maybe some I don't know, like percentages or something like that of subscribers who are paid, and is that something that's growing? Are you finding success in that? Has that is that helping you like expand your ministry?
Yeah, well, so that's always a question is when to monetize or how much content do you provide for free versus what do you provide only for paid subscribers? And so far, all I've done with paid subscriptions, I have them on because you don't have to use them. But if somebody decides to subscribe monthly or yearly, I've positioned it currently as supporting the work. I don't offer, I have some templates that I've made that, like guided journaling templates and prompts that are only for paid subscribers. But a lot of people will do either, they'll do like a free post on the first half of the week, and they'll do a paid post in the second, or alternate weeks or something like that. And I think that my personal thought with this is to provide most of the value for free as much as possible. And I will, in the coming weeks, I actually have a couple of more in-depth, deep dive guides for using and utilizing Substack, and kind of a reframing of how we think about promoting ourselves, especially on Substack, that I'll have more details just more of a deep dive for paid subscribers. But I would say 80% of that content will be free for everybody. So that's kind of what I've decided works pretty well in terms of like a percentage of paid subscribers to free subscribers is pretty low, which is totally fine because these are the people that they say, I love what you're doing. I love what God's doing through this, and I just want to support. And so it all means the world. But I haven't done like a huge offer for paid subscribers or anything like that. So that's kind of where I'm finding it. But you really just have to feel it out for yourself, whatever works for you. And I don't think there's a one size fits all for how that works, but it's very possible with Substack to make a decent income.
Yeah, I do. I understand the tension there and how to balance and how to divide the pie, so to speak, between what you're offering for free and what you're offering behind a paywall. So yeah, I appreciate your thoughts on that. We have a few minutes left and we've got a good showing of ladies here. I just want you to feel free to ask questions in the chat or unmute if you have any for Grant. Now's the time.
So, would you suggest just getting completely off? Like everybody knows that I my WordPress is the bane of my existence. Um, so I actually have a meeting with a web designer tomorrow, and I'm going to probably move over to Squarespace, but I'm considering not doing a website at all and just moving everything onto Substack. What's your thought on that?
Well, I my own if this was me in that position, I can tell you that there's when it comes to writing, especially long form content, you're posting in a blog format anyway. Um, with WordPress, Squarespace, in order to get found, it's usually either by search engine or people sharing. And so you kind of have to promote yourself on some social media or uh, really optimize each post for SEO, target keywords, and all this different stuff. I
Mhm.
haven't had to do any of that with Substack. Utilizing the notes feature again, I'll sound like a broken record. The full discoverability has come from that. And Substack does have some search engine optimization things as part of setting up your publication. Um, and you can even utilize your own domain. Uh, and
Okay.
so if you have one already, you can just
Mhm.
transfer it to Substack. So it won't be the writerscalling.substack.com. It'll be whatever domain you want. And if you do that, that helps a huge boost in SEO. So for me personally, if I'm writing a blog, I would move it to Substack. That's my I'm all in on it. And the nice thing about the email subscribers that you're getting is that it's not limited to the Substack platform. You can download those anytime. So if you ever want to move off platform again, you have all those. That network you built can go with you. So I'm all in on it.
I think that's a great option for you, Carrie. I might have said that to you once or twice before.
I
Just
think,
saying,
yeah,
just
maybe
saying,
10 times or something. Yeah.
just saying.
Grant, I've heard that Substack is a good platform if you're writing for other writers. Um, how does that like do you know in your audience is Christian writers, but do you find that you get organic traffic because of the way Substack like promotes things, or like I'm wondering if somebody who's writing about whose audience is not writers, if that would, obviously there's people on Substack that have different audiences, but what do you think in terms of the majority of, I mean, maybe it's not even a majority question, but like are the chances good for like if I'm writing about home repairs, would I be able to attract an audience, on a Substack type platform, or does it tend to be more geared towards people who have that literary or writer bent?
That is an extremely good question because you are absolutely right that I would say is a majority. I don't know what the percentage would be, even if it's only 55%, but a majority of the people on there are writers. And so that's a common thing where people are saying like, I'm writing to writers and I'm not really hitting the audience that I intended necessarily when they're in a different niche. So a couple of things about that is obviously for me, that hasn't been so much of an issue because that's who I'm writing to. But if you go on Google and you search for something that's related, so in a similar way you would have an unrelated blog to Substack, I mean, an independent blog, certain keywords that you're hitting will show up in the search results and they'll rank there. So the same thing happens with Substack. So it's not fully independent. It gets integrated and scanned and it'll show up in Google. So the organic growth is there. People share them on different platforms too. If you look at your metrics, you can see what percentage of the views on this post came from Facebook, for example, or different things like that. And so in terms of discoverability within the platform, using notes, for example, it is probably more of a self-contained thing. However, I think that might be changing a little bit because Substack's been growing a lot lately. And I see people coming in from all different things like, or different niches like homesteading, trying to think philosophy, which is more of a humanities thing anyway. But yeah, there's all kinds of different examples, and these people are getting found on Google utilizing the same thing that the rest of us are with Substack notes and stuff like that. But as more people are coming in, the discoverability is higher for them there. So if you're not if you're not writing for writers or don't necessarily want to target those people, um, then Substack is still a good option, but that is, I would say, at least a small majority of the people that are on there. So that's something to consider for sure. But I think you can make it the idea of Substack is such a low barrier of entry as compared to WordPress or something like that, that I think it's still a good way to start. You just might have to think outside of Substack a little more than someone like me does.
Yeah. And they use like I know originally when Substack first started, there were a lot of concerns that like it didn't rank on SEO. And now you're saying that aspect of it is a little broader. So as long as you do well with keywords, somebody outside of Substack would be able to find you.
Yeah, and this may have changed, but in my experience, especially lately in the last few months, I have seen a lot of stuff ranking. It may not be super high because I'm not putting in a lot of effort into that, but when I search something, I'll see results come up for somebody's Substack. The frustrating thing with that is that sometimes I'll go to it and it's a paid only post, and so I don't even know what it's about. But that's just something to keep in mind. I'm sure that's a different consideration, but. Yeah, the SEO tools are nowhere near as robust as something like WordPress or even Squarespace might be. So that if that's your intention, which is a valid path to rank for those, it may not be the best platform, but if you haven't started anything yet, it's a good way, I think, to start, get your feet in the water. And it does have enough SEO tools to make it rank.
Mhm.
So
Good to know. Thank
yeah.
you.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a good question, Kathy. I think Jana and I were talking about that maybe a year ago or
Yeah.
so, that it was just not very conducive to SEO and search and those kind of things. So it just give all these platforms a little bit of time and they'll catch up.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts or questions? Well, Grant, I mean, we've talked a lot about your Substack, but can you give us an address or however to find you on Substack?
Yes, it is. I don't have a custom domain like we talked about. That's something I should do. But anyway, it's thewriterscalling.substack.com is where to go to find it. Um, yeah, and then you'll see me on there. I have a couple of other publications, one that's more related to, um, you know, sharing the gospel directly, not anything that's targeted towards writers, but you can see different things on there, but start there, thewriterscalling.substack.com.
Yeah, and you can also just search for Grant Herbel in the search feature on Substack and find you that way as well. So,
Hmm.
well, this has been a real fun conversation. Thank you for joining us, and it's just been really edifying and enjoyable, and learn new things about Substack and about writing and calling. So we appreciate your time and your being here.
Absolutely. Very happy to have been here. It was great talking to you.
All right. Thank you all for being here as well, and you guys have a great day, everybody.